So welcome everyone to the Texas Indigent Defense Commission's Family Protection Mentorship Program orientation presentation, Formulas for Effective Lawyer Mentoring. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce Ryann Peyton, Executive Director of Colorado Attorney Mentorship Program, or CAMP, which is a project of the Colorado Supreme Court. We're especially excited to have Ryann presenting. They have a wealth of experience establishing and implementing mentorship programs, monitoring mentorship programs in Colorado, and we have in Ryann a true expert on professionalism and mentorship in the legal field. So the resources that CAMP has available on their website are truly comprehensive. Please take a moment to review the links that were sent if you haven't already. I know we can't necessarily prevent all problems in mentorship relationships, but these are excellent guides for how to make the most of a relationship and create community that we so desperately need in this space in Texas. A quick note that this program is CLE accredited by the State Bar of Texas for 1 hour of CLE credit. It is titled Formulas for Effective Lawyer Mentoring, and its CLE number is in the chat, but the number for those who can't see it is 174-251-562. So with that, thank you so much, Ryann, for your assistance with this effort and your work. We are excited to have you. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. It's good to be here with you all this afternoon. Greetings to you from Denver. And I just want to thank you all for the work that you do. I'm a former family law attorney. I did that for 10 years before I moved into this role. And I know how challenging this work can be. And I'm just so grateful for all of you for stepping into this role. And so my hope today is to provide you with some great tools and resources for making the most out of your mentoring experience. I will warn you, there's a lot of information that we're going to attempt to cover today. So I'm going to move a little bit quickly, but feel free to interrupt me if anything is not clear in the moment. We're a small enough group. You can feel free to just unmute and say, hey, Ryann, can you slow down or explain that a little bit more? And hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. I will also make sure Natalie has this slide deck so that you all have the slides as well. And of course, you'll have the recording. So let me get this up and running and we'll get underway. All right. Okay, so as Natalie mentioned, we are the Colorado Attorney Mentoring Program. We are our Supreme Court statewide lawyer mentoring program. We work with lawyers, law students across the state of Colorado. It is our job to be the experts on lawyer mentoring here for our state. And so we do that by doing this type of orientation and training as much as we are asked to do that. And so, like I said, a lot of information in here, but hopefully will help you to ultimately have a wonderful mentoring experience. We're going to start with the concept of mentoring as a pathway to belonging. This is where we start in our conversations here in Colorado, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's how we see the role of legal mentoring. And I'll explain why that is in a few minutes. Then we'll talk about the nuts and bolts of a mentoring experience. How do we create a really productive, meaningful, relevant experience? The worst thing that happens in my office is when people get to the end of their mentoring experience and say, that was all right, or it could have been better. My hope is always that we're able to create an experience that is meaningful on some level for everyone. And then I'll leave you with some mentoring resources. I think most of which you already have, but just a couple more if you don't. All right. So mentoring as a pathway to belonging. Why do I start here? Well, ultimately, when we think about why we develop mentoring relationships, most folks tend to think about the career functions of mentoring, that it's really about knowledge transfer between a more experienced lawyer and a newer lawyer. And while that's absolutely true, there are other aspects of a mentoring relationship that are just as, if not more important than that knowledge transfer. And one of those aspects of mentoring is to create opportunities for people who are new to a legal community, whatever size, shape, form that is, whether they're new to the profession entirely, new to a specific geographical location, new to a practice area, that they're able to find belonging within that community. We always ask the question, who in your professional world has your back? And hopefully it's mentors that ultimately have your back, because it's through those mentoring relationships that we become socialized into the communities that we are a part of. We build our relationships, we build our networks. We feel better about what we do. We feel more competent about what we do, and we feel more connection to the work that we're doing. And all of those things develop through mentoring relationships. And so it's not just the typical career functions of mentoring that we think about. Mentoring provides all sorts of benefits for us. And so it's always worth taking advantage of a mentoring opportunity when it's provided to you. And in this program, a formalized program where you can do this, absolutely worth the time and resources to help you achieve all of these goals, which every practitioner has, really, regardless of your experience level in the profession. Everybody wants these things. I'm sure none of you are looking at this list of benefits of mentoring and saying, I could do without that. Everybody wants this. Everybody benefits from this, and that's why mentoring relationships are so important. So I've mentioned those career functions of mentoring. I think many of you probably think about mentoring in in this context, right? That it's really about how do we help folks learn the ropes of a particular practice area, organization, whatever it may be. So that's great. Again, we're not going to say that this isn't an important part of mentoring, but I want you to put a pin in this and consider that there's another part of mentoring that is also critically important, and that's the psychosocial functions of mentoring. And that's where we utilize mentoring relationships not just for that knowledge transfer, but for a more holistic understanding of who we are in the profession, in our practice, and the relationship between mentor and mentee that provides sort of that friendship, counseling, guidance counselor relationship. Again, that person who has your back. So, as we have this conversation today about the best ways to make use of your time in this mentoring program, I want you to hold both concepts: the career functions, the knowledge transfer, absolutely, but also the psychosocial elements of mentoring and why those are so important. And I think for people who practice in areas like this, like family protection, where we're dealing with people in crisis, we're dealing with a lot of our of secondary trauma, from what we're experiencing with our clients. When we're bringing our own lived experiences, I know some of you mentioned, your own experience in the family court system early on in your lives. We're bringing that all to the table. And so, especially in this type of a context, in this type of a practice area, the psychosocial elements of mentoring are critical. We need somebody there on those tough days when we have those tough cases, those tough clients, and to process the secondary trauma, the vicarious trauma that may come from the practice that we're engaging in. So keep those two things in the back of your mind as we go forward today. So with that, let's jump into the strategies. You all are here for the nuts and bolts. You want to know what are the practical tips. So let's get into those. And we're going to start with the idea of role clarification. To understand how to make the most of your time in a mentoring program, you have to know what it means to be a mentor and to be mentored. And so when I think about professional relationships, I think about them on this spectrum that you see here. It starts all the way sort of at the bottom with a buddy or a peer type of professional relationship, and then all the way up to a coach. And you'll see that mentor or mentoring is right in the middle. So I'm going to hold off on that for a minute and talk about the ends of the spectrum. So on the low end of the professional relationship spectrum are buddies and peers. So these are people that are more sort of informal relationships, people you may encounter every day in an organization, maybe at the courthouse, people that you encounter in your bar association, whatever, wherever you are, wherever you're in community. These folks who, you can just ask basic questions to when it comes to understanding how to navigate an organization or a particular practice area. You're sort of all in it together and able to provide that mutual support. And so, really wonderful relationships to have. I hope a lot of people here have those relationships, but that's not exactly what mentoring is. We jump over mentoring for a second and look at the other end of the spectrum. We have advocates or sponsors, and then coaches. So advocates or sponsors are people in our professional lives who have some sort of power, support, or power or status in the profession, in the community, in the organization that we're in. And those people are willing to leverage their power in order to help us. So for any of you who have been in private practice, in a larger law firm or organization in the past, you know who I'm talking about. It's the people who pull the strings, and they're the ones who, when they're making decisions about how work is allocated, who's going to make partner, all of those types of things. These folks are the ones who are in the room saying, "Hey, you should consider Ryann. They're doing great work, yada yada yada." So these are the people who are willing to put their professional reputation on the line for you. Now, that is something more than we ask from mentors. Sponsorship is something that a lot of mentoring relationships can turn into, but we don't ask that right away from a mentor. So we're not assuming or asking that our mentors are going to put their professional reputation on the line for us. On the furthest end of the spectrum is a coach. And I always say that a lot of times we change out mentor and coach, but they're two very different things. A coach is someone you're probably going to pay to hold you accountable and to work with you on a specific professional skill. So you'll probably go out and hire a coach if you need that type of support. So also not what we're asking or seeking from a mentoring relationship, which gets us back to the middle. And that's where mentoring lives, is sort of in the middle of this spectrum of professional relationships. And so what do we mean when we say mentor? We mean the guidance counselor. Think back to high school, think back to junior high. You had a guidance counselor in your school, and they had an open door policy, probably, and their role was twofold. One, they were there to help you with your academics, if you needed support and advocacy in your classes or whatever it would be. But they also supported you personally. If something was going on at home, you were dealing with some issues, from a personal perspective, making friends, whatever it was, that guidance counselor could do both of those things. And they were really there just to share experience, provide information, provide resources. But they weren't there to fix the problem. They weren't there to go be your champion or your advocate in other spaces. They were there to listen, help you thought process about it, provide support, provide resources. And that was kind of it. And that's when we think about a mentor, that's what we're asking them to do, is to be that guidance counselor. So something that's more than just a professional buddy or peer, but something a little bit less than a sponsor or an advocate or a coach. The Goldilocks of professional relationships is how I think about it. And so that's what we ask of mentors. And that's what we, as mentees, you should expect from a mentor. If you're a mentor, this is what you should be giving to your mentee. And we always say that mentoring is happening anytime a mentee is learning something they would otherwise not have learned or would have learned more slowly. So if that is happening, then mentoring is happening and you're doing it right. That's the question I get so often from people. Are we doing this right? And there are a lot of ways for mentoring relationships to be effective, but globally, this is what we're talking about when we talk about what mentorship is. So now that we're all on the same page about what mentoring is and what we expect from mentors, let's talk about how to approach a mentoring relationship. And it's actually more layered than you would think. Just like any relationship we have, whether it's professional or personal, there are phases to it. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And so as we're approaching this opportunity that's been presented to you to be a part of this mentoring program, we want to be aware of where we are in the phases of our mentoring relationship. And so there's 4 phases. It starts with purpose. We're here right now. That's kind of where we are as we're just initiating this mentoring program. And then we quickly move from purpose into engagement. And that's where we start to get to know our mentoring partner, get a sense of how things are going to work. We spend the bulk of our time in the growth stage. This is where the learning is happening, the work is happening. And then we get to the end of the relationship where we have our completion and reflection stage. So we're going to go through the stages, but we're going to go through them in terms of what types of things are coming up in each one of these phases of the relationship so that you can be prepared to make the most out of that phase. And so let's start with the purpose phase, which is where we are right now. And that's what I call the getting ready to ask for help phase. So this is where we are just getting in the mindset of being in a mentoring scenario, in a paradigm, in a framework, all the words where we actually are going to have to ask for help. And so sometimes when I say that the mentors check out, oh, this must be for the mentees. But the truth is, this is for everybody because as we're in the purpose finding stage, the getting ready to ask for help stage, mentors, guess what? You're probably going to have to ask for help at some point along the way, too. And you're going to have to be ready to receive asks for help. And so, in the purpose finding stage, we want to be preparing ourselves for that, regardless of what our role is in these relationships. And so, a couple of things you can be doing right now as you get ready. One, do some homework on yourself. What are you hoping to get out of this, experience? How is asking for help? Is that something you're really good at, not so great at, something that scares you? We're going to talk about asking for help later on in this presentation, but just sort of knowing yourself about how are you feeling about this opportunity that you have. Is it, exciting, nervous, but just kind of figuring out landing. Where am I with this? Then doing some homework on the field, specifically for the mentees. Before you start to take somebody else's time, start to collect information so that you're asking the right questions. And we're going to talk about that later as well. But you're really narrowing down, what you want to focus on in your time in the program based on whatever your professional goals are. Do your homework on each other. We live in the digital age. Give somebody a Google. It's always worth it just to know who you're talking to if you don't already know them or haven't had a chance to work with them in the past. It's also a great way to find some things out you might not otherwise know. If you Google folks, you of course get their bio and their LinkedIn and things like that. But sometimes you see, oh, they're a five, they run marathons, and I can see the times of the marathon race that they ran, and that gives you some insight into who they are. Or, oh, they're really active in this particular organization, they're on the board. So it's just a good way to kind of get to know who you're dealing with, and then get to a point of being clear about what mentor and mentoring means to you. I just gave you a definition that maybe resonates with you, maybe it doesn't. But before you go into this relationship, you should be able to articulate, this is what I think mentoring is, this is what I want it to be. And that's going to be good conversation for some of your very first meetings. And so, again, regardless of your role in the mentoring relationship, what does mentoring mean for you? And how would you articulate that to your mentoring partner? Okay. So that's a lot of the purpose finding, and we start to move from purpose into the next phase, which is getting to know one another, actually meeting with one another. And so it's always in these first meetings that a lot of relationships go south, not because people aren't good at this, not because people don't like each other, but because people just don't know how to maximize that time in those first couple of meetings. And so things you want to be covering in your first meeting or four are the things we're going to talk about next. A lot of rapport building, getting to know one another. We'll talk in detail in a minute about how we can do that very well. But your first meetings really should be about understanding one another as human beings and as professionals, making sure that you're having conversations about how you want to have conversations. I know that it can be a challenge for folks to want to talk about talking, but communication and maintaining contact are key to a successful relationship, mentoring relationship. And so you have to talk about that, how people like to be communicated with, when they want to be communicated with, what are the boundaries, what are we, what topics are off limits, not off limits. Feedback is a place where a lot of people just skip over it, brush over it. But in any mentoring relationship, there's going to be feedback from the mentor to the mentee about competency building, skill deficits, things like that. Feedback from the mentee to the mentor about communication, about bedside manner, attitude, things like that. And so it's important to have a conversation with one another about how you like to give and receive feedback because everybody is different. And if you don't talk about how you're going to give and receive feedback, you probably won't give and receive feedback, or you'll do it in a way that doesn't bring connection, and the relationship can get strained at that point in time. So have an early conversation about feedback, just to set yourself up for success. Establishing goals. A lot of people come into mentoring programs and relationships and say, well, I just want to grow, and that's great. But that's not really helpful to giving you a roadmap. I think the most successful mentoring relationships have established goals. Now, you don't have to have 3 pages of established goals, but at least one, maybe two or three. This is what I would like to accomplish by the end of this relationship. Will give you that opportunity to know where you're going. Otherwise, you're sort of a rudderless ship throughout your time in the program. And so then after we say what are our goals, we need to make a plan for how we're going to achieve those goals. And we're going to talk about that as well, how you can make a plan for achieving those goals. But those last two things, that's your roadmap. And without that roadmap, it can make the relationship really challenging. So spending the time in these first meetings, setting some key components around communication and around goal setting is going to set you up for success in your mentoring relationship. And we're going to go through a lot of these in a few minutes. Okay, so now we've moved into officially the second phase of the relationship, which is the engagement phase. And so this, it can start after just one meeting, but depending on the people, it may take a couple of meetings to move into the real engagement phase where we're getting to know one another. Part of how fast, or part of what determines rather, how fast you move into the engagement phase is your own personality and your own comfort level with being vulnerable and being willing to let your guard down a little bit to build the rapport within the relationship. So I have a couple of tips for you to help you build that professional rapport so that you can move into this engagement phase a little more quickly and a little more easily. And if you take nothing else from our talk today, I hope that you will take the very first point with you. And I know it sounds a little, kumbaya, but I want you to really think about your experience in this mentoring relationship as something that you are worthy of. We could spend a whole afternoon talking about issues of worthiness and shame and all of that in the legal profession and for lawyers. But what makes it a lot easier to connect with somebody is when we believe that we're worthy of that connection. And so I'm here to tell you that, if you're a mentee, you are worthy of being mentored. And if you've been asked to be a mentor, you are worthy of mentoring. You have something to share, something to give. And so shifting that mindset to believing you're actually worthy of being a part of this program and a part of your mentoring relationship will go a long way to helping you to build rapport with your mentoring partner. So if you're willing to lean into that a little bit, it really makes a huge difference if you can let that in. Okay, so looking for indicators of shared humanity. This is where I say, look, you got to get out of the office. No mentoring relationship is sustained by sitting across a desk from one another and having long conversations about war stories in the profession. Get out of the office, share an experience. Here in Colorado, we always tell folks, if you love to ski, and your mentoring partner does too, go skiing. Do you like to fish? Go fishing. Do you have kids? Have a play date. If you're geographically close to one another, have a play date with your kiddos. Walk your dogs together. Whatever it can be, but it can be anything rather, but do something that allows you to share in one another's humanity, especially if you have shared interests. Do those things together, and that will accelerate the growth of your relationship and your rapport. Vulnerability and self-disclosure, especially for mentors, to say, yeah, when I was first starting out with this, I didn't know what I was doing either. I was terrified. Here's a time I really screwed up. Being able to be vulnerable and disclose the things about yourself that maybe didn't go so well in practice allows your mentee to it normalizes it for them and makes you come off this pedestal that they may have put you on, where you're just a human being, you're another professional, a colleague, and you all are sharing in a really tough practice area. I know many of you, all of you, do trial work, are in court. So I'm a former litigator myself. I got to take my litigator hat off sometimes and remember that when I'm in conversation with people, I'm listening to understand, not to respond. My mentee is not on the witness stand. I'm not cross-examining. I'm really here to listen, and it goes both ways as well for the mentee to also be listening to understand. If all we're doing is having conversations where we're just listening to respond to one another, there's not a lot of learning there. And that leads into the next point, which is if you treat this like a transactional experience, it will be one. And so if what you are hoping for from this experience is a transformational experience, then you got to be open, you got to be vulnerable, you got to be willing for it to be transformational. Otherwise, it will just be another professional, transactional, check the box experience or opportunity. One of the questions I get a lot in the engagement phase is how do we stay connected? Because we're all obviously very, very busy. We're spread out across the state. How do we not let this fall through the cracks? Being a part of a formal program always helps with that. There's usually aspects of the program that keep you in contact, but things to think about. One, make an agreement about it in your first meetings. How often are you going to meet? How often are you going to check in with one another? Not every mentoring meeting is the same, looks the same. So it's okay to say, once a month we're going to meet, but we're going to check in with each other every other week by phone, by email, by Zoom, whatever it is. But make an agreement about that in your first meeting so that you know what you're working on or what you're working with. Having goals. Again, if you have work you're doing, goals you're trying to achieve, you have a roadmap for that, it's more likely you'll stay in contact. If you have no plan, no goals, no roadmap, then it's a lot easier to just keep putting off the relationship. What I try to help people avoid is saying, having the mentor say to the mentee, just reach out if you need anything. That's not helpful because the mentee may not know what they need, or they may not know how to reach out. So you have to have these conversations and have a plan in place about what you're going to be working on together and when you're going to be doing that. The other key to maintaining contact is boundaries. A lot of times we don't reach out because maybe it's too late at night. Maybe they don't want to be contacted on the weekend. Maybe what I'm asking is the wrong thing. So having conversations in your early meetings about boundaries of the relationship. It's perfectly fine to say, please don't call or text me after 7 o'clock at night because I'm with my family, or please don't call or text me on the weekends, or to say, I'm happy to discuss X, Y, and Z, but I'd rather not get into ABC. It's so setting those boundaries. It's great to set boundaries, and it helps the relationship actually to do better. So think about what are your boundaries in this mentoring experience, and convey that to your mentoring partner. And then we already talked about feedback. So all of these things keep you in communication, keep you in contact throughout the growth of your relationship, if you're able to get these in place early on. I'll skip that for time, but you'll have the slide. Okay, so I've talked about goals and the roadmap of goal setting as being very important. I want to give you a couple of ways to set goals. I never like to assume that we're all very good at setting goals because it's not something we're all very good at. So here are some approaches that you can consider. I call them, well, I don't, they're somebody else made these up, but I'm just conveying them. One is the OKR model, which is the objective and key results model. I really love that one. SMART goals. A lot of people have heard about SMART goals. We'll talk about those, and then micro goals. And so early on in your conversations, talk about what kind of approach you want to take to your goal setting, and if any of these frameworks can be helpful to you. So first, the OKR model, objectives and key results. For those of you who think strategically in like an upside down funnel or an upside down triangle, that's what this is. So objectives are really broad statements about what you're trying to achieve, what your goal is. And then your key results are more specific, smaller goals that you need to achieve first in order to meet that broader objective. So it's sort of like an upside down, it funnels down from the high level objective down into those key result goals. And so what I like about this is it gives you an opportunity to set a really big picture goal, and then gives you specific smaller goals that to achieve in order to meet that bigger one. So here's an example. So the big goal here, I know somebody said that they haven't done a jury trial. So for that person, this might be a good model. So let's just say that the objective here is I want to do a jury trial in the next 12 months. Okay, that's a wonderful goal. But in order to do that, there's going to be other things that you have to do first. You can't just walk into a jury trial tomorrow. So we have to think through what are some of the things, the skills necessary to acquire in order to do a jury trial. So in this one, the key result then is I need to get experience to actually lead a trial strategy. Okay, great. So how do we do that? Well, in order to get that experience, I'm probably going to need to shadow or second chair a trial with another lawyer. Maybe it's my mentor, maybe it's not. I need to practice jury selection. I've never done that. So maybe I need a mock jury, or again, maybe I need to shadow that so that I can learn about jury selection. And I probably need to do some depositions so that I can get some practice in witness examination. So this would be an example of an OKR goal that you would have in your mentoring relationship. The big picture goal, I want to do a jury trial, and then the key results become smaller goals to achieve in order to get the experience you need to do that jury trial. So again, that funnel, but this is a really great framework for goal setting. Lots of people are familiar with the SMART goal model: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So if this is a better model for you, wonderful. Again, it asks you to take your goal and break it down into the parts that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. So taking that goal we just had, the specific goal is I want to do a jury trial. What's measurable is I'm going to spend X amount of hours shadowing. I'm going to do one mock jury. I'm going to do 2 depositions. That's what's measurable. What makes it achievable? Well, how much time am I going to spend on this every week in order to get there? So in this framework, we've added now a new layer of 2 hours a week. That wasn't in our OKR model. So if this is something that's helpful for you to break it down into, what's going to make this achievable for me? Well, I've got to break it into bite-sized pieces. Relevant. So I'm going to make it relevant to me. I'm going to utilize this program to do this. Time bound, then of course, when do we want to get this done? And so when you put it all together, you get more of a narrative form goal, like you see at the bottom. But it's the same goal from before, it's just worded differently. And so every brain works different. So the OKR model might work for your brain, SMART goals might work for somebody else's brain, but two frameworks you can use. And then the last one, and this is for folks who want to boil it down even further, right? For those folks who say, I need as many bite-sized actions as I can get. Micro goals are a great way to do that. So with micro goals, we're going to take those key results and we're going to break it down even further. So remember, one of our key results was spending 10 hours shadowing or second chairing a trial. That in and of itself is a big goal and has a lot of micro goals to it. And so for someone who needs a really long runway in goal planning, this is helpful because it's not just enough to say I'm going to spend 10 hours shadowing. What do I have to do to get to the point where I can spend 10 hours shadowing? I got to identify somebody to shadow. I have to identify the trial opportunities. I got to break the trial up, jury selection, witness examination, opening, closing arguments, all of that stuff. And then I need to actually schedule the time to do that. So again, talking about with your mentoring partner, what works for goal setting? How does your brain work? How are you motivated in picking one of these frameworks if it works for you to set those goals? But the reason I'm spending so much time on this in our conversation is because goals are the make it break it for mentoring relationships to be successful. If you don't have a goal, it's probably not going to be a great experience for you. So do spend some time with that goal setting process. Now, if you're saying, well, that's great, Ryann, I would love to set some goals. I have no idea where to look to set goals. I give you the 5 MIs. This is a wonderful place to look for potential goal setting opportunities for yourself. The 5 MIs are basically the 5 pillars of you and who you are in the world and in the profession. And so in each one of these pillars, there are places where you're going to have a lot of strengths and places where you're going to have challenge. So if it's worth it to you to go through each of these pillars and identify what are areas of challenge in these pillars, and are any of those areas of challenge places where you could find goals for your time in this mentoring program. So just real briefly, your style is your presentation style. How do you communicate? How do you present? How do you influence people? If litigation is something that is a challenge for you, there's probably some stylistic of places that you can look for goal setting and the way that you communicate and influence folks. Your career, so this isn't just what you do every day. This is like, how do I get from point A to point B? Where do you want to be in 10 years kind of conversations? Some people are really good at creating long-term goals and strategies, planning for career growth. Others have challenge. So maybe there's elements of your broader career and career planning that you want to goal set around here. Your world, and this can be the world in and of itself. It can be Texas, it can be your particular county, it can be your particular community, it can be your practice community, but whatever you would say is your world. Maybe you want to be more involved, maybe you want to grow in leadership in certain areas. Where are the challenges in who you are in your relationship to where you are in the world, in your geographic location, in the communities where you take up space. Your craft, this is what you do every day. So where are your challenges? Do you have challenges in research and writing? Do you have challenge in litigation? Do you have challenge in client management? Whatever it is about your day-to-day work. A lot of people start here because it's easiest for us, right? We're used to setting goals around challenges in our day-to-day work, but that's what we're talking about there. And then your life. We all wear hats other than just the lawyer hat. So maybe there's some goal setting around time management for you. Maybe you're a newer parent and you're trying to figure out how to do what you do and be a parent. Maybe you take care of your parent or another family member, and you're trying to figure out how to manage those things in your life. So all of these places are places you can look for goals to set in your relationship. And then finally, with every meeting you have, whether it's the very first meeting or your 300th meeting, have an action plan. So every time you're leaving a meeting, you're thinking about what comes next in terms of what commitments have I made. This goes for both mentees and mentors. What do I have to do to get those commitments done? Is there anybody else I need to bring into the loop about this? And just thinking about what do I need to do to effectuate whatever we've talked about and agreed upon here. And then never leave one meeting without confirming the next meeting. Why? Well, we've all been in the email back and forth. Does this work for you? Does this work for you? Does this work for you? And then we give up. So always confirm that next meeting before you go into the next one. Yes, you will get the 5 Mys in the slide deck that I'll send to Natalie, and you can go ahead and print that out. But those will be in the slide deck for you, Sherry. Oops. Okay. All right, I always get this question around the engagement time, which is, what if I've just been paired with someone who is not a good fit? And the truth of the matter is that may be what happens. As much as every mentoring program tries as best as it can to make good matches, it just happens sometimes it's not going to be a great fit. The good news is you're not being asked to marry this person. This isn't forever. And so you may not have perfect chemistry, but that doesn't mean that the relationship can't be relevant and meaningful. So if does feel like a bad fit, you've been paired with someone who's just not going to be your forever mentor, which is okay. Uh, we want to start thinking about, well, what can we get out of our time here? We don't always get the benefit of working with people we like. I can tell you that from personal experience, but there's always something to be gained. And so is it an opportunity to practice working with someone who is different from you? Is it an opportunity to get to know somebody that you might not otherwise have gotten to know, even if you don't really need to know them after this experience? But asking yourself the question, what can I gain from this opportunity, even if this isn't my perfect mentoring partner? And then know that one mentor is never enough. Even if you have your forever mentor, that person who, when you're retiring, you're going to look back and say, oh, I would not be where I am today without this person. Even if you have found that person, we all need more than one mentor. So where can you find additional mentors to fill in the gaps of that not so great fit person? Now, of course, if something is really off, you can talk to the program administrators and see, if there's anything that can be done. But again, we don't always get the luxury of working with people that we love, and so trying to work through those challenges is a great way to grow professionally as well. Okay, and speaking of growing, we now move into the growth phase of our relationship, and this is where the magic happens. This is where the work of mentoring is happening. You'll spend most of your time in your relationship in this growth phase because this is when you're doing the things. You've set your goals now. You're working on achieving your goals, and the very first question that comes up in the growth phase is, who's in charge? Who's driving the bus of this mentoring relationship? And let me tell you what the research tells us, that when the mentor shows up to be the expert, the mentee actually feels less empowered. Now, I want you to just let that sink in for a second, because I think most of our concepts of mentoring are, well, the mentor is the expert, so the mentor should be in charge. But ultimately, that does not prove to be very successful in a legal mentoring relationship, because the fact of the matter is you're both educated, competent people, and the mentee actually will start to take a back seat if they feel like the mentor is controlling everything, is driving the bus. And so we want in these relationships for the mentee to be the proactive bus driver of the relationship, and the mentor to be more passive and reactive. Now, does that mean the mentor checks out? No. Does that mean the mentor just, says, give me a call if you need anything? No. It just means that mentor, you may need to sit on your hands for a minute and let that mentee grow in their confidence to lead the direction of the relationship. Now, you may have, as the mentor, a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge about something, but that doesn't mean you need to direct the relationship. Let the mentee direct the relationship, set the agenda, set the goals, and your job is to support them in achieving those goals and developing their own self-confidence. And so you, as the mentor, have to work really hard not to be the problem solver, the fix-it person, oh, I've seen that, I know how this is going to go, and more of the thought partner, the guidance counselor, and let that mentee drive the bus. And so, mentees, I'm telling you, you've got to drive the bus, because if you don't, that mentor will pull back, will check out, won't lean in. And so, mentees, you're in charge. Take the lead and lean into the mentor for their expertise, and don't rely on them to drive the agenda of the relationship. All right, we're going to come back to help, that pesky four-letter word that can, bring a lot of feelings up for a lot of people. But like we started out in our purpose finding stage, in order to be effective in our mentoring relationships, we have to understand our relationship with help. And so I want to talk about this. It is a four-letter word, but it's not one of those four-letter words. I hope at the end of this, you'll see help as something that is something we're all worthy of and should expect from one another as a community of practitioners who's doing really important work. So let me start with this. Did you know that most of us underestimate other people's willingness to help us by up to 50%? It's the human condition. We just believe nobody cares. Nobody cares. If I'm struggling, nobody cares. If I'm having a hard time, if I ask for help, someone's gonna say, "I don't have time for you. I'm taking too much." So we underestimate. But what the research says is we are underestimating because people want to help us. And I know in the legal community, people want to help us. There's a lot of reasons to help one another as practitioners. And so, at the very least, take this away, that you're probably underestimating both other people's willingness to help and your ability to help other people. But we can't talk about help without talking about, how we probably were raised and how that can influence our relationship with help. So think back to your childhood and the messages that you got from your caregivers about help. And whether, if you asked for help from them, did you get it? Did they encourage you to seek out help? I think the study that took place from the University of Indiana is really interesting because it talks about help from a socioeconomic framework. So they looked at students from different income levels and found that students who came from families with more wealth, higher incomes, were encouraged by their parents to ask more questions, and that children who came from lower socioeconomic households, less incomes, were told by their parents to be deferential to authority, to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, figure things out by themselves instead of asking for help. So if this study shows us that just class can impact how we ask for help, whether we ask for help, what else influences whether and how we ask for help? Race, gender, other identities. And so thinking about for yourself and your own identities, your own lived experience, what was the messaging that you got about help? And how does that show up now in your professional relationships? And going into a mentoring relationship, you have to be comfortable with asking for help. And so know this about, there's no judgment in this. It's just, you got to know this about yourself in your own relationship with help in order to benefit from it. Imposter phenomenon. We used to call this imposter syndrome. We don't anymore. It's a phenomenon because it's not an illness that people have. But I know many of us, including myself, still deal with imposter phenomenon. A lot of lawyers deal with this because we're high achievers and we're anxious, and we feel like eventually someone's going to figure out we don't know what we're doing, and they're going to fire us, right? I keep wondering when they're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing, and throw me out. But it just comes from this place of fear and anxiety that we don't want to be unmasked, right? As not knowing. And so this impacts women and first generation lawyers and lawyers of color more than anybody else. So understanding whether this is a thing for you and how this comes up, because we're afraid of being found out. If you are someone who has imposter phenomenon, you won't ask for help, right? Because if we ask for help, then we're basically saying, "Hi, I don't know what I'm doing," and then everything's gonna fall apart. And so it's important that if this is something that is an issue for you, bring it up in your mentoring relationship, get to know it, make friends with it, so that it doesn't prevent you from asking for help. And if you're a mentor and you're mentoring someone who is a first generation lawyer, a lawyer of color, know that this may be something that's coming up, and you might have to push a little bit harder when it comes to help seeking opportunities. Perfectionism, we, again, lawyers, I always get the chicken and the egg question. Are lawyers perfectionistic when they come into the profession, or do we create them? And the answer is yes, both things are true. Perfectionism gets in the way of help seeking. So just like imposter phenomenon, if perfectionism is something that you struggle with, know how that's showing up and understand how that's showing up in your ability to ask for help and to deal with setbacks and bring that up in the mentoring relationship. So how do we ask questions? There actually are right and wrong ways to ask questions. I don't think are stupid questions. I agree with that, but I do think that there are right and wrong ways to ask them. So it's always helpful if you're afraid of asking for help or don't know how to have some guidelines on how to ask in the smart way. So 5 rules for asking questions the smart way. 1, ask open-ended questions. Again, we're not, no one's on the stand. We don't need yes or no questions. A yes or no question, 90% of the time isn't actually going to help you learn, right? Because it's so matter of fact. We want open-ended questions where your mentoring partner can talk. We're all lawyers. We love to talk. And so we're happy to talk. So open-ended questions give you the most opportunity for learning, and it motivates your question partner. So if you come to me as your mentor and you ask me a yes or no question, I'm going to say yes or no and move on. But if you ask me a great open-ended question, I'm really going to want to engage with you about that particular topic area. So it creates a more meaningful communication experience. Avoid stress. What does this mean? Well, think about yourself. It's 7 a.m. in the morning. You're trying to get your kids out the door. Your dog is barking. You're starving. You haven't had your cup of coffee. And if I, your mentee, call you and ask you a question in that very moment, are you going to want to answer it? No. When we are hangry, when we are stressed, if somebody's preparing for trial, not a good time. So knowing when people are tapped out, stressed out, and not asking questions at that time, because you're not going to get a great answer. When you ask a question and you're getting a response, shut up. Again, sort of that don't listen to respond, listen to understand. So silence can be really golden for the person who's asking the question to just let that sink in for a minute and take time to let it sink in. You don't have to have that knee jerk follow-up question or response right away. Let that information sink in so that you can ask better questions down the road. If you don't ask, you don't get. At the end of the day, that's it. And so if you don't ask questions, you don't get you don't get answers. And so ask when you need to ask, as long as you're kind of following these rules. And then do favor follow-up questions, but only after you've had some time to let things sink in. Again, it doesn't have to be transactional. You can come back 3 days later and say, when we were talking about that case the other day, so I've been thinking about it, and I want to ask you this. So keep the conversation going. It's not a one-time ask, and that's the end of it. All right. Some tips for mentees, tips for mentors. A lot of these we've already talked about. I'm not going to read them all. But again, the mentee, you're the bus driver. Take that active role. Don't make this a transactional experience. Again, you'll have this slide so you can keep that. Mentors, things I want you to pull out of here. One, do you have your own need for support? If you have never been a mentor before, you might need a mentor. Mentors need mentors. So where do you need some mentorship and some support? Your job is not to have all of the answers. Your job is not to fix anything for your mentee. Your job is to teach. So be willing to teach and don't go into your lawyer problem solver fix it mode. And I say this with all the love in my heart, you've got to get over yourself and be vulnerable. Who did you need when you were just starting out? Who's the mentor that you either were lucky to have or really wanted but didn't have? And show up and be that person. You can do this. You're worthy of it. Let me just check our time. Great. All right. A couple of great qualities that we always look for in legal mentors, and I know you all are being paired together. But as a mentor, this is especially your first time, think about how you can bring these qualities to the relationship, because great legal mentors have these characteristics, and so things for you to aim for and your own goals and growth for your time in this program. One is to value curiosity and learning. The best mentors never stop learning, never get to a point where they say, I know it all. There's nothing more for me to learn here. Now I'm just going to pass all this information on. This is a wonderful learning experience. I can't tell you how many mentors learn so much from their mentees. So you have an opportunity here to learn and grow in your own way. And so be open to that in this process and be curious about what you can take away from it. Be able to give feedback. If you are someone who struggles with this, you might need your own mentoring, you might need your own professional development support around giving feedback. But you really can't be a good mentor to anybody if you're unable or unwilling to give feedback. And again, if you have conversations early on in your relationship about how your mentee likes to receive feedback, maybe they are someone who, just pick up the phone, tell me. Maybe they want it in an email so that they can have time to process it before you talk about it. Maybe generationally, they're of the generation millennials who like to have the compliment sandwich. If you have hard feedback for me, can you please tell me something I'm doing well first, then the hard stuff, and then end with with the things I'm doing well? So knowing what your mentoring partner wants and needs in terms of feedback delivery, and then being able to do that. But you're not doing anybody any favors by not giving feedback, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings or you don't want to harm the relationship. This mentoring is all about feedback. And so by withholding it, you're doing a disservice to both of you. Being willing to discuss issues of belonging, equity, inclusion, whether it's regarding your mentoring partner and their position in experience in the legal profession, or whether it's regarding your clients and issues of equity and things like that. And so these are conversations that need to be in mentoring relationships, especially if you are mentoring someone who is from an underrepresented or historically excluded community or identity in the legal profession. When mentoring relationships don't talk about these things, and you're mentoring someone from a historically excluded community, that mentoring relationship suffers. And so it's important that these topics be something that come up in your conversations and you have some comfort level in discussing them. Reflective listening and empathy skills, no surprise here, but it's really hard to do this, especially for lawyers when we are very, kind of type A practical. I think because of what you all do for a living, I'm sure many of you have wonderful reflective listening and empathy skills. So, what I'm going to say about this one is probably not many of you need to work on this, but what you need to do is make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Again, because of the secondary trauma that comes in the work that you do, you can be tapped out, from working with your clients all day, and then you come into your mentoring meeting and your empathy battery is drained. There's no shame in that, but maybe having a mentoring meeting after a really tough day in court, doing the work that you do isn't the best setup. So thinking about when is your empathy battery going to be at its highest so that you can show up for your mentoring partner in a way that's meaningful and not continue or not exacerbate any burnout you're already feeling because of the really challenging work that you all do. And then finally, if it's possible, as your mentoring relationship grows, to be a sponsor someday for someone that's a part of this group that, maybe remember that spectrum of professional relationships, being a mentor who's willing someday to put your own, power or political clout on the line on behalf of somebody else is a wonderful growth in the relationship and a way to open up the doors in the mentoring relationship to know one another even more and even more deeply. And so being willing to be a sponsor, being willing to grow into that role helps the mentoring relationship do better because you can't sponsor someone you don't know. You can't put your name on the line for someone you don't know. And so if you're willing to do that down the road, then you're going to create the space to do that in your mentoring relationship. A couple of notes here for mentoring across differences, meaning if you're paired with somebody who is, has a very different identity than you, whether it's, gender or race, ethnicity, culture, it can be challenging to be paired with somebody and you've never really worked with folks from that community or with that identity before. And what we see sometimes when we're paired with someone who's very different from us, and sometimes it's even politically different, but when we're paired with somebody who's very different than us, we clam up, we shut down, right? We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to do the wrong thing. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to have some of these conversations I've been talking about today. And so it's important to notice that if that's happening in your relationship, if that's happening for you because you're paired with someone who's very different from you. But there's so much richness in these relationships when mentoring partners who are from very different identities get paired together and do it well. They're some of the best mentoring relationships that anyone can ever have. And so, a couple of tips here for you. I'm not going to read them, but I think the biggest ones are acknowledging what's coming up and why things, why that might be challenging, why you might feel some discomfort. Respect is huge. Treating other people the way you would want to be treated, giving people the dignity they deserve. I know in the work that you all do, I'm sure many of these characteristics and traits are things you bring in every day. So bring them into your mentoring relationship as well. A quick note about email. You cannot, and I'll repeat it, cannot have a mentoring relationship over email. We tried it during the pandemic in some cases, and it does not work. A real mentoring relationship, a successful mentoring relationship, really only uses email for the practicalities, setting up meetings, exchanging information to clarify things, time-sensitive questions, just maintaining contact. It's okay to check in, to set up a plan. Well, every Monday, I'm just going to send you a note. How was your weekend? Anything on your to-do list this week that I can be helpful with? That kind of email, perfectly fine. But email in and of itself is not a substitute for getting together, for having a Zoom meeting, for sharing a cup of coffee, whatever it is. Now, I say here, don't give critical feedback unless your mentoring partner has said, I would prefer critical feedback in writing before we talk about it so that I can absorb it, then that's fine. But if you have feedback to give somebody and they have not expressed to you the desire to have that by email, don't do it by email. It's not helpful. So again, email is wonderful. We love it, but use it sparingly in your relationship and not as a replacement for true connection. All right, finally, our completion stage. So we've moved through our purpose finding, we've moved through our rapport building, we've moved through our growth. We're coming to the end of the relationship. Now, in programs like this, there's a defined end to the mentoring program, which is a nice point at which to end your mentoring relationship. But you don't have to. Anytime we see formal programs like this being built, we hope that the mentoring pairs will continue to work with one another beyond the program. That's success right there. But it's also okay to say, I think this relationship has run its course, and thank you so much. What I don't want you to do though is what I call professional ghosting, which is where you just the program ends, right? There's the end date, and then you just stop returning phone calls or stop returning emails. Don't ghost people. You've both put considerable amount of time and energy into the relationship. You owe it to each other to communicate an end, whatever that may be. And so, whatever it means to end that relationship, communicate with one another about it, and don't just walk away from it. When you get to the end of a mentoring relationship, it's always good to ask yourself, what did I learn? What can I take forward with me? So when you get to the completion stage of your relationship, think about creating a professional development plan for yourself. And this is for both mentees and mentors, because mentors, I guarantee you're going to learn a lot about yourself in this process. And there's probably growth areas for you at the end of the day. So utilizing this experience to help you create a professional development plan that you can take with you after the relationship is over. And so, what this looks like is really assessing and gathering information on what were your pain points, where are your challenges, what did you learn from this experience about areas of growth for yourself, what do you want to work on, and then going back to the goal setting. It can be OKR, it can be SMART goals, but then what are your goals around those areas of growth for yourself? Write it all down so that it's someplace that you can keep referring back to. Figure out what you need from here. Maybe you need to continue working with your mentoring partner as a way to achieve some of these additional goals. Maybe you need a different mentor who's got a different skill set who can help you move through this. Maybe you need a coach. But what do you need in order to meet those goals? And then really celebrate what you can take away from this experience as a win. Where did I grow? What did I learn and that I otherwise would not have if not for this experience? And so a professional development plan is a really great way to take the learning from this experience into the next stage of your career. And it's a great ending exercise that you can do with your mentoring partner before you part ways. Okay, so a couple of mentoring resources. Like I said, I think you have a lot of these, but I want to give some context to them. So our website, which is coloradomentoring.org, has a ton of resources. We have a whole resource library with articles and videos that you can utilize if you would like. For folks who are new to being a mentor, if you would like some additional training on what it means to be a mentor, we have a recorded webinar that you can watch on your own time just to get a little bit more, some more skills I'm sorry, some more tips as you launch into the relationship. I did send the initial meeting guide and goal plan just to get you talking, and your first meetings give you a place to land as you're having these conversations. And then I also want to direct you, we have 11 different model mentoring plans on our website. These are mentoring curriculum that cover different topic areas. We have one for solo practitioners, one for women in the law, one for parents in the law. We have one for people who work in more rural legal communities. We have one for people who want to be judges. We have one for people who are from underrepresented, excluded identities. But why I'm directing you to those is because they all have discussion topics, activities, learning objectives that could be beneficial to you as you're thinking about goal setting. If you're thinking about what do I do with this person who's sitting across from me, how do I engage them? The model mentoring plans are a great guide for that. Give you ideas so that you don't have to recreate the wheel. So please feel free to take those. You can just click on them and they download in Word and use them if they're helpful to you. I'll also leave you with my direct contact information. If you have any questions that I can answer, feel free to reach out by phone or email. And feel free to follow us on our social media channels. We do CLEs every month that are free, that are via webinar. You're welcome to attend if any of the topics are of interest to you. But any resource we can provide to you to support you in this work, we're happy to do so. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Ryan, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. I'm gonna just stop the recording now.